Live from New Delhi, you're watching DDI Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Good afternoon, Ollie.
Hello Tanvi, it's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half hour, the latest on the attacks in Russia's Dagestan, the EU's plan for frozen Russian assets and fresh unrest in New Caledonia. First, the headlines.
Vladimir Putin expresses deepest condolences to the victims of Dagestan and Crimea attacks. Kremlin blames the United States for this barbaric missile attack on Crimea. First session of India's 18th Lower House of Parliament begins. Prime Minister Narendra Modi takes oath as a Member of Parliament for the third time. France could see civil unrest and violence that is related to the elections, says its Interior Minister ahead of the first round of voting on June 30th. And the European Union says it has the solution to use frozen Russian funds for Ukraine as foreign ministers meet in Luxembourg. Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed his deepest condolences to the families of the victims of the Dagestan attacks. This comes as Russian Anti-Terrorist Committee, an investigative committee, investigated the scene of the attacks. Earlier, Dagestan Governor Sergei Melikov visited the church and house where an Orthodox priest who was killed in the attack used to live. Melikov earlier called the incident a terror attack. The region is also observing 3 days of mourning.
Subsequent operational search and investigative measures will be carried out until all participants in these sleeper cells are identified. And of course, they had been preparing, including from abroad. I would like to ask all of you, dear Dagestanis, dear guests of the Republic, to remain calm. The situation is now under the control of the government authorities and law enforcement agencies.
At least 19 people, including policemen, were killed as gunmen attacked synagogues and churches in Russia's Dagestan region on Sunday. The simultaneous attacks happened across the cities of Derbent and Makhachkala. 5 gunmen were also killed. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks so far, which took place 3 months after 145 people were killed in an attack claimed by the Islamic State on a concert hall near Moscow.
Subsequent operational search and investigative measures will be carried out until all participants in these sleeper cells are identified. And of course, they had been preparing, including from abroad. I would like to ask all of you, dear Dagestanis, dear guests of the Republic, to remain calm. The situation is now under the control of the government authorities and law enforcement agencies.
DD India's Dasha Chernyshova joins us from Moscow now on the story. Dasha, has any more information come out about these gunmen behind these attacks and about the organization behind the Dagestan attacks?
Well, Russia's investigative committee's central headquarters is in charge of the investigation, and they are yet to provide the coherent version of what has happened. So far, they presume that the attacks in the city of Derbent, as well as the regional capital of Makhachkala, could be connected. Again, the investigation is ongoing, but the case is going under the terrorism accusations, as well as the possession and theft of weapons. These are the two to recent developments, because theft of weapons was not anywhere on the radar before this morning. Now we understand that the investigators are looking for the accomplices. They are looking for the sleeper cells in the region, because certainly the attack has changed the lives for many people living in the Republic of Dagestan. We're also hearing that the Russian president has issued his deepest condolences to the families of those killed and wounded. We are also hearing that no special address by Vladimir Putin is planned by the Kremlin in relation to this attack or the attack against Sevastopol.
Dasha, these attacks in Russia's Dagestan echo those in Crocus City Hall in Moscow recently. Is Russia facing a renewed terrorist threat?
Well, certainly, as Russia is treating these two cases as acts of terrorism, the threat of terrorism is very much on the radar for the Russian authorities. But at the same time, the narrative we are getting here in Russia from the officials is that that was an attempt to destabilize the situation internally, with many officials and analysts first thing saying that this attack might have been perpetrated from outside the country in order to sow discord among the multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-confessional society in Russia, and especially in the Republic of Dagestan. Again, the attack has been carried out on the Holy Trinity Sunday, when Orthodox Christians celebrate an important holiday in the predominantly Muslim Republic, targeting the Orthodox churches as well as a synagogue. So you can certainly see the complexity of the region as well as the Russian society. But again, the call of the Russian authorities is not to be uncalm, not to worry, and not to follow the discord that the officials say the foreign powers are trying to sow. Again, this is treated as act of terrorism, but so is the case of Sevastopol attack, for instance, which Russia is also saying has been an act of terrorism. But in this time, Moscow says it knows very clearly who is behind the Sevastopol attack, while the investigators are yet to confirm and provide a coherent version of who is behind the attack in Dagestan.
Okay, we'll have to wait for the results of the investigation committee. Thank you very much, Dasha Chernyshova, reporting from Moscow. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has blamed the United States for a Ukrainian attack on Crimea with 80 ACMS missiles that killed at least 4 people, including 2 children, and injured over 150, and said that there would be consequences, calling the attack absolutely barbaric.
We witnessed an absolutely barbaric missile attack in Crimea. We understand perfectly well who is behind this. The president last week repeatedly told about who is guiding towards target these technically complex missiles. It is not the Ukrainians who ensured these launches and so on. Everything is perfectly clear here. You, as representatives of media, need to ask my colleagues in Europe and especially in Washington, press secretaries, why their government are killing Russian children.
Russia, the world's biggest nuclear power, has started updating its nuclear doctrine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said this, citing an earlier statement by President Putin. The conflict in Ukraine has triggered the biggest confrontation between Russia and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And let's head across to Europe now. European Union foreign affairs ministers are meeting in Luxembourg on Monday to discuss the situation in Ukraine and in West Asia. My colleague Oli Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Oli, what's the latest from the EU meeting? Seems like Joseph Borrell has a plan to use the frozen Russian funds for Ukraine.
Well, Tanvi, the European Union says it has found a way to use frozen Russian assets to buy arms for Ukraine. And as you were saying, European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Luxembourg to try and hash all of this out.
We have these revenues coming from the frozen assets, and we have to look for a way in order to use them, avoiding any kind of blockage. We have a process in order to make this work quickly. The first tranche of money will come next week in July, yes. The second will come some month later. this money cannot get stopped. It has to be used, and we have a legal procedure in order to avoid any kind of blockage.
Well, European Union countries have also agreed a new package of sanctions against Russia. The bloc's 14th package of sanctions against Moscow includes a ban on reloading Russian liquefied natural gas in the EU for further shipment to third countries. It also offers the EU more tools to crack down on circumvention of sanctions, as well as targeting an additional 116 individuals and entities for actions against Ukraine. Well, DD India's William Denzelo joins us live now from Brussels. And William, on this plan of Josep Borrell's to use frozen Russian assets, Hungary had been holding out. How exactly has an agreement been reached, and how will the plan work?
Yeah, Ollie, well, we've heard from Josep Borrell, who said that such an agreement was absolutely vital, considering the fact that Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, has just been in North Korea, really in an effort to bolster trade ties, especially the supply of military equipment for Moscow in the ongoing war effort. Borrell says that this shows that Russia is essentially in it for the long haul, and that is why the EU needs to keep investing in Ukraine as this war continues. There are really two prongs. You mentioned the 14th round of sanctions. That's really in a bid to further curtail the purse strings of Moscow going forward, including especially on top of the liquefied natural gas ban as well, to go after about 5 billion euros or so in Russian exports, as well as to target around 27 Russian vessels used for everything such as Russian energy to grain supplies, as well as military equipment as well. As always with these sanctions, the EU says the key, though, is in the implementation. Then there is the flip side of the coin, which is, of course, funding Ukraine. Over $200 billion worth of assets from Russia have been frozen. The key is how to use the funds from that effectively for Kiev. Budapest has been a huge holdout, but Josep Borrell says that because Hungary had abstained from a vote early on the year on the question of using those frozen Russian assets, he says that that is why Hungary isn't entitled to a say at this meeting. That is why he's confident that the EU can go ahead and start using those funds for Kiev.
OK, William, and while I've got you there, just briefly, what is Apple being accused of by Brussels?
Absolutely. Well, this all goes down to fair play rules, and essentially one of the EU commissioners likened the Digital Markets Act to a game of football, saying that essentially it acts as a referee, saying that without competition, it's like a game played where one side is locked in the changing room, unable to compete against the other. Apple is accused of providing conditions that are not a fair playing field. That is why the EU has warned Apple that they could essentially provide a financial penalty in the future of around 10% of its annual revenue unless it makes changes. Essentially, it is a gatekeeper for many app developers on its app store. It says it's not steering these developers to provide enough options for people to look elsewhere other than Apple's app store. Important to note that Apple has maintained it is doing everything it can to provide effectiveness, that it is providing competition. So Apple now has the opportunity to respond from the EU's findings. Ollie?
William, thank you. EU leaders have also expressed concern over the risk of a wider conflict in West Asia amid fresh threats from Hezbollah. This comes after Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah threatened EU member Cyprus for the first time and other parts of the Mediterranean region. Greece says it stands by Cyprus amid global threats from terrorist organisations.
We are in the midst of two horrible wars, which are now in a state of escalation, unfortunately. Russian aggression against Ukraine and the war in the Middle East, especially for the Middle East, in spite of the hope that we can have a peace formula and a peace process, we can see now escalation in all respects. It is absolutely unacceptable to make threats against the sovereign state of the European Union. We stand by Cyprus and we will all be together in all kinds of global threats coming from terrorist organizations.
A top US general has warned of a wider conflict if Israel launches an offensive in Lebanon. While acknowledging Israel's right to defend itself, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman C.Q. Brown warned that a broader conflict might draw in Hezbollah's backer Iran. Last week, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah said that nowhere in Israel would be safe if a fully fledged war broke out between the two sides. Border skirmishes between Hezbollah and Israel have been common since the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says while the phase of intense fighting against Hamas in the Gaza Strip is coming to an end, the conflict will not end, he says, until Hamas's rule in the Palestinian enclave is over.
If there is an agreement, it will be an agreement according to our terms, and our terms are not to end the war, to leave Gaza and leave Hamas as it is. After the intense phase is finished, we will have the possibility to move part of the forces north, and we will do this, first and foremost for defensive purposes, and secondly, to bring our evacuated residents home.
New Caledonia's jailed pro-independence leader Christian Tian has been extradited along with 6 others, leading to fresh violent protests in the French Pacific territory. Protesters set fire to the town hall in the Kumak commune and destroyed areas in Pita. The protests began in May after a French reform vote allowing French residents of the territory voting rights. Locals fear this will dilute the impact of their votes and demands for independence. Now, France could see civil unrest and violence related to the upcoming elections. That's according to Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin. This as campaigning enters its final week before the first round of voting.
Des tensions extrêmement fortes.
It's possible that there will be extremely strong tension, first of all, on the evening of the election. So we will making sure that order is maintained.
A new French government under far-right leadership would break with decades of unfinanced spending and stick to the European Union's fiscal rules. That's according to National Rally lawmaker Jean-Philippe Tanguy. He says the party is in contact with investors to demonstrate their credibility when it comes to France's public finances. French stocks saw heavy losses after the announcement of snap elections.
Our program will cost nothing in the sense that we will not let the deficit slip away once again. Everything will be set against savings or reductions in tax loopholes, deregulation, efficiency or renegotiation, for example, of our net contribution to the European Union. But we are not committing to any expenditure set against deficits or additional borrowing.
Raising hopes for a faster European Union integration, North Macedonia is getting a new nationalist-dominated government. Prime Minister Hristijan Mikoski's party, VMRO-DPMNE, won general elections in May this year. Mikoski, who will serve his first term as premier, says it's time to roll up sleeves and start solving problems in the country. He says his 20-minister government will start giving immediate results. And that's it from me here in London for today. Tanvi, back to you.
Thank you, Ollie. Ollie Barrett reporting from London. Still to come on DD India Global. Hong Kong's debate over whether foreign judges should continue to sit on the city's highest court deepens as media tycoon Jimmy Lai's appeal is heard in the top court. Celebrating 100 years of French fashion, Vogue kicks off Haute Couture Week in Paris.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. On to India now. The first session of the lower house of Parliament, Lok Sabha, after the 2024 general elections began in New Delhi on Monday with observance of silence, marking the solemn occasion of the first sitting of the 18th Lok Sabha. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took oath as a member of the 18th Lok Sabha. This is the third term of the Indian Prime Minister as a member of the Lok Sabha. He retained the Varanasi seat in the general elections, which he has been winning since 2014. As a leader of the House, he was the first one to take oath today. Pro Tem Speaker Bhartahari Mehtab administered the oath of office to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This was followed by the oath of the panel of chairpersons appointed to assist the Pro Tem Speaker in running the proceedings of the Lok Sabha until the election of the Speaker. BJP MPs Radha Mohan Singh, Fagan Singh Kulaste took oath as members of the chairperson panel. Union Ministers Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan, Nitin Gadkari, Manohar Lal, Piyush Goyal and other members took oath as members of the Lok Sabha. Addressing media ahead of this session, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the government will work 3 times harder in this third term, underlining the 50th anniversary of the emergency. He called the period a blot on Indian democracy.
जो लोग भारत की लोकतांत्रिक परंपराओं पे निष्ठा रखते हैं, उनके लिए 25 जून न भूलने वाला दिवस है। कल 25 जून को भारत के लोकतंत्र में जो काला धब्बा लगा था, उसके 50 वर्ष हो रहे हैं। भारत की नई पीढ़ी इस बात को कभी नहीं भूलेगी कि भारत के संविधान को पूरी तरह नकार दिया गया था, देश को जेल खाना बना दिया गया था, लोकतंत्र को पूरी तरह दबोच दिया गया था। इमरजेंसी के ये 50 साल इस संकल्प के हैं कि हम गौरव के साथ हमारे संविधान की रक्षा करते हुए भारत के लोकतंत्र, लोकतांत्रिक परंपराओं की रक्षा करते हुए देशवासी संकल्प लेंगे कि भारत में फिर कभी कोई ऐसी हिम्मत नहीं करेगा जो 50 साल पहले की गई थी और लोकतंत्र पे काला धब्बा लगा दिया गया था।
More from Asia. Iranian presidential candidate Masoud Pezeshkian campaigned in the Iranian capital of Tehran, pledging to break the dam of Western sanctions on Iran and ruin those who benefit from them. Iran is due to conduct snap elections on June 28th after the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash. Pezeshkian, a reformist lawmaker, is running against 5 other candidates.
We must ruin those who benefit from sanctions, those who benefit thousands of billions from these sanctions, and nobody knows. We will stand against them.
On to Hong Kong now. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai and high-profile barrister and democracy advocate Martin Lee were among the defendants in an appeal, including 5 others heard by the Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal to have their conviction of illegal assembly overturned. The case has fueled a debate on whether foreign judges should continue to sit on the city's highest court amid a national security crackdown. David Newbeher, a former head of Britain's Supreme Court, is one of the judges in the panel hearing the case. The 7 people were arrested in August 2019. Lai is former chairman of Next Digital, which published Apple Daily, known for its fierce and critical coverage of China and Hong Kong. And next we take a look at other stories making news around the world. South Korea's Prime Minister Han Duck-soo visited the scene of a fire accident where at least 22 people have been reported dead, with 5 others missing. The devastating fire broke out at a lithium battery factory near Seoul, causing explosions at the storage unit on Monday morning. South Korean Interior Minister Lee Sang-min has assured of full support to the victims of the accident. Known as the land of the midnight sun, Iceland saw a host of golfers from across the globe competing throughout the night in the Arctic Open Challenge this weekend. While it is almost impossible in the dark frozen conditions of the winter, locals and tourists capitalize on the constant daylight in the summer months to enjoy this sport. And celebrating 100 years of French fashion, Vogue has kicked off Haute Couture Week in Paris. Hosted a month before the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, the show was themed around the Games, which last took place in the French capital 100 years ago. The star-studded sports-themed runaway show witnessed Katy Perry, Sabrina Carpenter, Aya Nakamura, British singer FKA Twigs, as well as Serena Williams, Venus Williams, NBA Rookie of the Year Victor Wembanyama, athletics legend Mauri Jose Perec, and models Kendall Jenner and Gigi Hadid in presence. What a star-studded event ahead of the Olympics. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles, Facebook, X, Instagram at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can download our DD India mobile app. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.